Let me set the scene for you. The Epstein files have been dominating headlines for weeks. Names are dropping, documents are surfacing, and the entire country is watching to see who says something, who stays quiet, and who gets caught in the middle. And then, out of nowhere, the First Lady of the United States walks in front of cameras and breaks her silence. Now think about that for a second. Melania Trump does not do this often. She is not someone who rushes to a microphone every time her name gets pulled into a controversy. So when she steps forward voluntarily, on camera, with a prepared statement and addresses Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell by name, you have to stop and ask yourself, what is really going on here?
First Lady Melania Trump going before cameras to deny any involvement with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
I have never had any knowledge of Epstein abuse of his victims.
The First Lady accusing unnamed people of, quote, looking to cause damage to her good name and insisting both Epstein and his accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, were not her friends, emphatic that Epstein did not introduce her to the president.
I am not Epstein's victim. Epstein did not introduce me to Donald Trump.
Because here's the thing. The statement itself was not the story. What she said was not the story. The detail buried inside that statement, the one that is now spreading across every platform and sparking conversations everywhere, that is the story. And by the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why this moment matters, why it is bigger than most people are treating it, and what it potentially reveals about how this entire Epstein saga is going to play out. Stay with me, because we are just getting started. So let us walk through exactly what Melania Trump said, because the specifics here really do matter. She came out and made 3 very clear denials. She said she had no knowledge of Epstein's abuse of his victims. She said Epstein and Maxwell were not her friends. And she was very deliberate about this next one. She said Epstein did not introduce her to Donald Trump. Now that last denial is interesting on its own, because nobody in the mainstream conversation was loudly pushing that specific claim. So the fact that she addressed it directly, unprompted, is something a lot of people are flagging. When someone walks into a room and says, I did not do the thing nobody was directly accusing me of, it tends to raise more questions than it answers. That is just human nature. But here is where it gets complicated, because even as she was making those denials, the Justice Department's released Epstein files already contained emails written by Melania herself, addressed to Ghislaine Maxwell. And the tone of those emails is, let us say, warm. She calls her G. She asks how she is doing. She compliments her appearance in a magazine photo. She asks about Palm Beach. She closes with, love Melania. Now, does that prove anything? No. People exchange friendly emails with acquaintances all the time. But what it does do is create a gap, a visible gap between the characterization she offered and the documented record that already exists. And that gap is exactly what everyone is talking about right now. Drop your thoughts in the comments, because I genuinely want to know how you are reading this.
The First Lady also addressed emails she exchanged with Maxwell that were released as part of the Justice Department's Epstein files. Melania Trump wrote, Dear G, how are you? Nice story about JE and NY Mag. You look great on the picture. I know you are very busy flying all over the world. How was Palm Beach? I cannot wait to go down. Give me a call when you are back in NY. Have a great time. Love, Melania. President Trump previously calling the Epstein story a hoax and urging Americans to move on. But today, the First Lady declaring it's time to, quote, work openly and transparently to uncover the truth.
Here is where the story takes a turn that almost nobody predicted. After making her denials, Melania Trump did not just walk away from the cameras. She pivoted. And this pivot is arguably the most significant part of the entire statement. She called for transparency. She called on Congress to act. And she said very specifically that every single one of Epstein's victims should have the opportunity to testify publicly, have their testimony entered into the congressional record, and only then, in her words, will we have the truth. Think about the weight of that statement coming from the First Lady, whose husband just weeks ago was calling the entire Epstein story a hoax and telling Americans to move on. That is not a minor inconsistency. That is 2 people in the same household delivering 2 completely opposite messages to the public on one of the most sensitive topics in American political life right now. So what changed? Was this coordinated? Was this a strategic repositioning? Or is this a genuine independent stance from a First Lady who is navigating her own place in this story? These are the questions that political analysts are chewing on today. And honestly, there are no clean answers.
President Trump previously calling the Epstein story a hoax and urging Americans to move on. But today, the First Lady declaring it's time to, quote, work openly and transparently to uncover the truth. Calling on Congress to act and saying all of Epstein's victims should have a chance to testify.
Each and every woman should have her day to tell her story in public if she wishes. And then her testimony should be permanently entered into the congressional record.
yet. Now, just when you think the story has reached its most dramatic point, something else happens. Because hours after Melania's statement was released, a group of Epstein survivors came forward with a response, and their message was sharp and direct. They accused the First Lady of shifting the burden. Their argument was essentially this: putting the weight of uncovering the truth on the shoulders of survivors, requiring them to come forward publicly, relive their trauma, and testify before accountability can happen is not justice. It is re-traumatization. And that framing completely recontextualizes the statement. What Melania presented as a path toward truth, survivors are calling a detour away from accountability. Because the question at the heart of all of this was never really about what the victims experienced. The public largely believes them. The courts largely believe them. The question that remains unanswered is about the people around Epstein, the ones with power, connections, and resources, the ones whose names appear in documents and emails and flight logs. Asking survivors to carry that burden publicly, rather than demanding answers from those individuals directly, is a tension that is not going away. And the fact that this response came so quickly, so organized, and so clearly articulated tells you that the survivor community has been watching this story very closely and was ready to respond. Do you think their criticism is fair, or is any push for transparency a step in the right direction? Let me know what you think below.
Then, and only then, we will have the truth.
In a statement late today, a group of survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's abuse accused the First Lady of shifting the burden onto survivors rather than pushing for accountability. Jacqueline Lee, ABC News, Los Angeles.
So let us pull back and look at the full picture, because individually each piece of today's story is significant, but together they are pointing at something larger. The Epstein conversation is no longer something that powerful people can simply dismiss, delay, or deflect. The documents are public, the emails are public, and now the First Lady herself has entered the conversation in a way that guarantees this story stays in the headlines. What this moment reveals is that the pressure is building from every direction. Survivors are organized and vocal. The public is paying attention at a level we have not seen before. And even figures at the very highest levels of the American political structure are finding that staying silent is no longer a viable option. The one detail everyone is talking about is not just the email. It is not just the denial. It is the fact that we are now in a phase of this story where the responses themselves are becoming part of the evidence, where every word chosen, every claim made, and every denial delivered is going to be examined, cross-referenced, and remembered. The truth about what the Epstein network really was and who was truly connected to it is still unfolding. And if today proved anything, it is that this story is far from over. If you made it this far, drop a comment and tell me what stood out most to you from Melania's statement. Was it the denials, the emails, or that pivot toward calling for congressional testimony? I want to hear your take. And if you are not subscribed yet, now is the time, because this story is only going to get bigger, and we are going to be covering every new development as it breaks. Next up, we are going to be looking at the names that still have not addressed their appearance in the Epstein files and asking the question the mainstream media keeps dancing around. You do not want to miss that one.